Now, what I was talking about is one of the things we haven't talked about in the figured bass is the use of figured bass to indicate non-chord tones. Okay, so you can see like in something like 9/8, 9 is not a number we've used before in figured bass, right? We've had 6/4, we've had 7, we've had 6/5, 4/3, whatever, but we've never really used 9 before. Or did you? Did you do that, 9? Yeah, okay. So 9, or the figured bass can be used to indicate, as well as just inversions, it can be used to indicate non-chord tones. And so that's what things like 9/8 are indicating, is there's some ninth above this given note that's going to move to an octave. Okay? And like here, there's some seventh that's going to resolve to a sixth. So those are those things like seventh. Now this is a seventh of the chord, you know. But here's kind of like the octave is going to become the seventh of this dominant seventh. So there are different things going on, but still, just like you would in normal figured bass, you want to follow the intervals, you know, or follow the numbers. What the numbers say, those are the intervals you're going to use. So let's first do the harmonies, and then we'll go back and see what how I want to voice this. So this is obviously just a 1 chord, right? And then when we have the note A and we have 6/5, what kind of chord is that?
It's going to be a first inversion 7.
First inversion 7, yeah, and a 7/7, so it's a 7 half diminished 6/5, right? If I'm in the key of G, then the chord built on F sharp is that. It's a half diminished, and in first inversion, it looks like that, when the A is the lowest sounding pitch. So that A is the lowest sounding pitch, the base of that. And then here, so if we ignore the 9 for a second, what do we get?
A 6.
No. If we have a B, and we ignore the 9, and we just look at the 6.
Is that a first inversion triad?
Yeah, just a first inversion triad, a 1 chord actually. Because if you put like a 6 above, that's the G. The 8 is going to be some other B somewhere, and we're just missing the 3rd above. Remember, in figured bass, in figured bass, the 3rd is usually implied. So like when you talk about a 6 chord, you know, if you see the bass note, you know, and the bass note and the number 6, you're thinking it's a first inversion, but there's a 3rd up there somewhere. So the 3rd is there, it's just implied. So this would be a first inversion 1 chord with a 9th going to 8 on the 8th note. So we'll just, right now we'll just write 1/6, and then we'll get into what that is when we get later on, get to the realization. Okay, now we've got a C with the number 6/5 below it. What's that going to be?
An A chord in 7, some sort of 7. So
Yeah.
first inversion 7th of the A.
Well, again, so if this note C is, we know if it's 6/5, that's the 3rd of the chord, right? So if C is the 3rd, then A is the root, and then if it's the 7th chord, it's going to have 2 notes on top of it like that. So this would be a 2/7, and again, since this is 6/5, it's going to be a 2/6/5. So it's a minor 2 chord with a 7th. It's a minor 2 minor 7th chord. And then here we've got the note D with just an 8 moving to a 7. So what's that going to be? You know, if you think that, you know, if there's just an 8, that's another D, there are some other numbers that are implied. The only reason the 8/7 is really there is to tell you that you're going to have a D that's going to move to a C, which is going to become the 7th of the chord. So if that's the 7th of the chord, what other notes do I need there?
F sharp.
F and A, yeah. So this is a 5/7. Or eventually, once that 7th kicks in, will become a 5/7. Right? And 5/7 resolves to just the G, which is 1, right? Okay, and then what about the E with this number 6 below it?
It's the first inversion.
First inversion.
The triad, and there's a, it would be the
C
C
chord.
chord.
Right, yeah, so it's C, E, G. If you want to think, you know, like, that's the third, so here's the root, here's the fifth, something like that. That's
4/6.
Yeah, it's a 4/6, yeah. And then again, remembering that the 7th is probably not the chord tone here, the 6th is the chord tone. So this would be a 6/4,
Second inversion.
which means that this is what kind of,
Well, that would be the fifth of the G.
of the G chord, right? So if this is the 5th, then the root is G.
So it's a
So the key
5,
is
6,
G.
4.
It would be a 1/6.
Oh, 1, 6.
1/6.
Sorry.
Yeah. And 1/6/4 we would hope would go to 5,
Five.
right? And again, this same situation here, 8/7, 8/7 with a no D. So it's a 5 that will eventually become a 5/7,
So,
and then resolving to 1. So now you know what harmonies are going to go here. We've got a 7 half diminished 6/5, and a 2/6/5, and of course, a couple dominants. Yeah.
would it ever happen that you'd have like a second inversion with a ninth? So like, I mean, it doesn't exist, like a 9-6-5?
Yeah, you mean so, like
Yes.
the notes 9/6, or the numbers
Right.
9/6/5? Yeah, you could, yeah.
Yeah. So
The-
9-6-5 8.
In traditional harmony, you would consider the ninth as a non-chord tone. You know, you'd say, well, that number is indicating a non-chord tone, and it probably would go to 8. In commercial harmony, it gets more complicated because the ninth will go anywhere, you know. So, but yes, it's definitely possible.
And that's how they would list it, is
Yeah.
9-6-5.
Always the higher number first, so it'd be 9, 6,
So it
5.
came to 3 numbers.
And if there was a sharp 3, you know, it'd be 9, it'd be something like.
And I mean, you're sharpie.
Yeah, you're
or
sharpie
raising
the
the
third.
third.
Yeah, did we talk about that thing? You know, so in figured bass, if you have an accidental just by itself, it refers to the third of the chord. If you have an accidental next to a number, so if you had, you know, like, that means sharp, or raise, you're right, it's raised, sharp is probably wrong, raise that particular number. Also used for raise is this symbol, like a line through the number, a line through the number. Well, it should go, actually should go this way, sorry. It should go that way, not that way. And, you know, you could also have something like that, you know, so flat's also possible, but there's no other symbol for flats, it's flat. Okay. Remember, that always refers to the interval above, you know, so if I have, you know, something like that where it says flat 5, and my lowest note is this, then that's going to be this with a flat above it. Not the fifth of the chord, but the note that's 5 notes above the lowest sounding pitch.
But when it's, when you have just the accidental without a number next to it, it's always the third because you're considering assumed group position?
Yeah, because well, that's
if
only
you
going
had
to
that-
show up if you have a root position. You
So,
know?
well, like if you had that 9-6-5 sharp,
Uh-huh.
so we're in second inversion there, or excuse me, first inversion. So does that mean it's not going to be the next note up? It's still just going to be the third of that chord?
No, it's going to be the note a third above the lowest sounding pitch. So that accidental refers to the third above the lowest sounding pitch.
Which in the case of a first inversion would be a chord tone, but if it was a second inversion, it would be a...
Well, see, I would read that as a root position ninth chord, or something else, because, well, what would that be?
Since it's 6-5, isn't that first inversion?
Well, actually, if I can do that in my head. So let's say I had the note on G, and it was 9, 6, 3, a sharp 3, so that would be, that's going to turn really weird, but, you know.
it sort of becomes the fourth then.
Yeah, this is not such a good, let's say instead we have.
What if it was a second inversion? So 9, 4, 3, sharp 3.
Well, but if you had 9, 4, 3, then you would, I mean, you're talking about something like that or like this?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm asking about the impossible.
Yeah.
Because if it was second inversion, then the next note would be the fourth.
Yeah, yeah,
So would
exactly.
you then be raising the fourth?
You would be raising the fourth.
Or, you know, the fourth note above.
Right.
So you'd be creating a tritone.
Yeah, you wouldn't do this because this refers to this.
Right.
You know, always.
Well, I guess that's my question, because does it refer to the third of the chord always, or does it refer to the next note above the root always?
Well, the next note above the bass note always. So you know,
If
so
it's
the
in root position.
third above. So if this was, I'm trying to think of a good. Let's say we had B, then that would be sharp this, this, and the ninth above B would be
Yeah.
A. Wait a minute. No, the seventh would be.
Oh, sorry,
The
it's
C
above.
would be.
Yeah.
So if I saw this, that would be my chord, which is a really weird chord,
Sure.
you know. But that's what, because that sharp means put that note there and sharp it,
Okay.
or raise it.
So it's not all, it's then, so in this case, is it because that's the third above the bass, or it's because it's the note above the bass?
Because it's the third above the bass, so.
Okay. So
Or,
if
yeah.
we were in second inversion,
Uh-huh.
and so there wouldn't be a third above the bass, it would actually, the note above the bass would actually be a fourth.
Yeah, it still would refer to the, so you wouldn't write that, because you're, like you said, you're asking about the impossible,
Okay.
because you wouldn't have that there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it would just become the fourth.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay.